So, welcome to the final examination. Before I start, I want to thank the people. First of all, I'd like to thank Alan and Vincent for being in this class all year long. You have been consistent and hardworking throughout the year, so thank you very much. I'm sorry if now and then I lose my temper, but I really appreciate your dedication. I really appreciated the questions you've asked in this class. I would like to thank the school for giving me this platform and this classroom and this smartboard for the past 4 years. Believe it or not, but I've been here for 4 years in this classroom. The school has been very generous with me, letting me teach whatever I want, including the great books, including geostrategy, including game theory, including secret history. I'll be leaving the school at the end of this week. So this is my second last class. Tomorrow will be my last class. The reason why I'm leaving the school is I feel that I have a global audience, and I want to grow this global audience by going out into the world and engaging people outside in the world. So I want to focus more on my global audience. But I've been very thankful to the school. And third and lastly, I would like to thank my Substack community. So most of my income this past year has come from Substack. The subscribers there have been very generous to me. Because of the generosity, I've been able to keep my YouTube free of monetization. I've been able to avoid sponsors. I've just been able to focus on my teaching, the quality of my teaching. And so I would like to thank the founding members today by first of all, pointing out their generosity, but also by answering their questions. Starting next week, I will do a monthly Substack live stream with both founding members as well as paid subscribers. So once a month, it'll be founding members, and then once a month, it will also be paid subscribers. I'll talk more about that later on, okay? So this is the end of one journey, but the beginning of another journey. And don't worry, I will continue doing what I do because I love teaching, I love sharing my ideas with the world, and I love learning. And I want to be doing this for the next 50 years. That's my ambition, to structure it so that I can continue to influence people for the next 50 years. All right, so let's start the final examination. So first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read all the questions from the founding members on Substack. There's a lot. And after that, we will look at some questions from YouTube that my wife, who is here today doing the filming. I also need to thank my wife for filming and editing this class. She's here and she's helped me pick out some questions. And it's pretty random. So I apologize if your question was not picked, but there were just too many questions. And for the sake of time, we just picked a few. But we'll probably run over time today. Okay, just one at one. All right, so let's start. So this is from Nomi. And he or she just says, I don't have a question, but just a thank you. And this is the name of the Obergen Research Center, Nomina.life. And this person is also working to raise consciousness. So thank you so much for your generosity. All right, now we move to Karina. And Karina says that based on my lectures, it seems the US is pretty screwed. Yes. They need other countries to buy US treasuries. Yes. Israel's not loyal. Israel probably wants to work with other countries to establish their Pax Judaica. Yes. Okay. Russia's trying to make the dollar collapse and trying to exert its own dominance as well as for its own people. Yes. And China is just trying to figure out what is in its best advantage. Okay. So that's what geopolitics is. It's a game. Everyone's just looking for the optimal strategy. There's no loyalty. There are no friends. Okay, it's just a game. All right, so the US is currently in a race to make these AI data centers Um, and they need to control the population, yes, okay? So there are three questions. What are we to do? I understand we should build communities, but what does this look like? Pretty much anyone who has US dollars would be in a world of hurt. I mean, how would we buy food? What do you think our world will look like? Okay, so it's hard for you to predict what the world will look like because it hasn't happened yet. All right, it's important to have game theory in mind because it gives you the overstructure of the world. But it's also important to remember that we create the world that we want. All right, so let's just say tomorrow there's no more electricity. It doesn't mean that we start taking knives, start killing each other. What it means is that we change mentality because the circumstances of our lives have changed. So we start caring about each other more. So what happens is, maybe before in your apartment complex, you didn't know your neighbor. The lights go all out. So what you do is you open the door and you go meet your neighbors and say, hey, let's figure this out. Okay? So the thing to keep in mind is that fundamentally, we humans are extremely creative and extremely resilient. And the spark in us hasn't been activated yet. But in the circumstances that require us, we will become creative. And this has been true consistently throughout human history. So what we need to do is recognize that what makes us who we are our creativity, our resilience, our empathy, our imagination. This is who we are really. And the idea that we are economic machines or economic tools, and all we care about is buying stuff and making money, that's just a indoctrination that we have to suffer in recent history. Okay? So what's really important to keep in mind is that our greatest power is our imagination. So what we should be doing is working hard to build our imagination. And that just means learning. Learning through books, but also learning by listening to other people, experiencing viewpoints that are different from yours, and by experiencing things in the world. Okay? For example, traveling more, or doing things that are beyond your comfort zone. All right. Who do you believe would rise to the next global power, and how do you believe they would garner trust around the world after such an epic fall from the US dollar? Would be money backed by gold and other resources again? So I've talked about this before, but the US dollar as a global reserve currency, it's a historical accident. And it's never happened before in human history. And quite honestly, it probably will never happen again in human history. So once the US dollar falls, it does not mean that the global economy collapses. It just means that global reserve currency will probably transform into a basket of currencies, which includes US dollar, which includes gold, which probably would include British pounds, Swiss francs, a basket of currencies, right? So people will continue to trade, but it will not be as convenient as before, okay? So, and this is a process that doesn't happen like now, or tomorrow. It will take many years, many decades for this process to play out. Is there any way to get out of the Ponzi scheme once you're in it? This is a really good question. The answer is that the Ponzi scheme has to collapse before you can get out of it. And basically, the Ponzi scheme collapses when the US dollar, when the US government defaults on its debt. Okay, that's what a Ponzi scheme collapse looks like. And at that point, the US dollar is basically worth very little or almost nothing. It's gonna happen one day. It's a question of like when, all right? And it may sound painful, but again, we humans are extremely resilient. Just because there's more electricity, just because we can't drive our cars, just because we can't buy anything, does not mean we'll starve to death. We'll figure out a way to survive, okay? So let me give you an example where I take 100 people from different countries. For whatever reason, I transport you all to a desert island. Okay? It doesn't mean that you'll just fight each other because you're from different cultures. It won't mean that you'll starve to death because you don't speak the same language. What it'll mean is that somehow, some way, the 100 of you will create a new language and intuitively understand how to work together. You'll figure out that, you know what, I'm a good carpenter, so I'll go make wood. And another person like, well, I'm good at singing, so I'll make songs to entertain us at night, okay? It will happen very organically, it will happen very fluidly, dynamically. And that's what makes us humans so creative, okay, or empathy for each other. We don't have to speak the same language, and we're still able to work together, right? So don't worry about the end of the world. It just means a new world comes into being, right? All right. All right, this is from Hidden History Society. Okay, this is very long, but to summarize, what he's saying is that Freemasons were critical in America's founding, and Benjamin Franklin was a Freemason. Alexander Hamilton, mother was Jewish, so he was half Jewish, he was Scottish and Jewish as well. And so there are lots of these linkages between the Freemasons, between the Jewish faith, and these founding fathers. And I would say don't put too much emphasis on this, okay? There's going to be these overlaps, convergences everywhere. Doesn't mean they're not important, all right? All right, and then he goes on and says that, look, Engels and Marx congratulated Lincoln upon his re-election, and Lincoln was likewise a big fan of their publications, okay? What does that mean? It means that people with talent, people with ideas, respect each other, okay? It just means that, you know, I'm a curious person. I'm just interested in anyone who proposes new ideas and who does great things and who's an interesting person, okay? It doesn't mean that we're all conspiring together. It just means that we're all looking for new ideas. We all respect people with talent, all right? Okay. Basically, do you think these American leaders were English assets, and can you explain British capital shifting America from 1888 transatlantic period culminating to Bretton Woods and America taking over the empire after World War II? Okay, so this is a really good question, okay? First of all, Lincoln, Franklin, and Hamilton were not English assets. They were not English spies. But did they have contacts in the British Empire? Of course, because Britain was the most powerful country at this time. So there's going to be a lot of overlap, okay? There's going to be a lot of shared affinity, a lot of shared interests. Did they have French contacts? Yes. Did they have Canadian friends? Yes, all right? So the world of the elite is very, very small, and they're always in contact with each other, all right? So it is true that British capital shifted to America after the Civil War, right? And this led to the founding of the Federal Reserve, which led to Bretton Woods. Okay, so what happened was that the British were getting filthy rich off India and China, right? So they basically enslaved India and deindustrialized India and just stole trillions of dollars from India. They enslaved China with opium, and they're stealing trillions of dollars from China. And now what they have to do is invest their money somewhere. And the best place in the world to invest your money at this time would be America. You could also invest in South America, but the Americans were much harder working. They were much more ambitious. So a lot of the money went to America. Now, at this time in history, the Americans didn't like the British because they fought a war to get rid of the British, right? So the idea that you have all these trillions of dollars coming into America to buy out America, the Americans wouldn't have put up with this. So the solution was to have agents, people like Rockefeller, Carnegie, Vanderbilt, disguised as entrepreneurs, right? They were poor, and through their hard work, through their merit, they became billionaires. And that was they were a creation of the city of London. They were a creation of British capital in order to co-opt America. And they were so powerful that they were then able to influence American politics and then create the Federal Reserve, which then, after World War II, led to the Bretton Woods system. Okay, so that's what happened. So this is something that is still impacting America today. And many people who support Trump believe that Trump is a messiah figure who's come to help America rid itself of the disease of transnational capital, to get rid of the British, okay, to fight another 1776. There are millions of Americans who believe this, All right, and they have a point. All right, from Zoran. So he asks, it seems that the world is collapsing. Is there a way out of this collapse? The world is a fat person, but is it possible for the fat person to maybe work out, lose weight, and become healthier? Is it possible we take this step? If we can imagine, if we use our imagination, is it possible for us to save ourselves before we kill ourselves? And this is a really good question. And first of all, I would say it's unlikely, okay? Because the reality is that, yes, in theory, we could change, but in reality, if you just look around the people around you, most people don't change, okay? I would say of all the nations in the world, the nation that is the most resilient, that is most creative, that could change possibly, is America. So could America change? Possibly, but it would take tremendous leadership. A Messiah figure would have to rise to rally the American people in order to change. And that I don't think is likely. It may happen, I hope it happens, but I think it is very unlikely. I mean, the problem with this metaphor of an individual who thinks he's fat and wants to change is you need to recognize that a nation is a collection of vested interests, okay? And it's this conflict among these vested interests, what we call elite overproduction. That's what leads to decline. And the reason why it leads to decline is they're so focused on their internal conflict, they ignore the larger picture. And they only win if they're focused on winning. So they're willing to do whatever it takes to win, even if it means the destruction of their own civilization. All right? They're willing to sacrifice everything, anything, in order to win. What is a billionaire? A billionaire is a person who is willing to kill his own grandmother for money. Okay? That's what a billionaire is. All right. From I'm sorry, I can't pronounce this person, okay? All right. Why do you never mention Vedic eschatology? It's very, very important, yes. And Vedic thought has spread across Europe and America through New Age collectives and movements. Do you think these will shape the world in the coming decades? I wonder if you overlook them because their eschatologies don't seem aggressive enough to move history. Okay, so one thing I want to clarify is that the way I teach is I see learning as a journey, okay? So when I teach, I'm asking questions and I'm trying to work out the answers myself. So it isn't like I know all the answers and then I'm giving you a glimpse into my mind. That's how it works, okay? I myself am working with certain assumptions. I'm expanding it outwards in order to form a more general understanding of the world. So this is a very simple way. So another way of saying this is, I don't know enough about Vedic eschatology to comment on it, okay? I want to know more. I will learn more. Eventually, I want to make a trip to India and learn about Vedic eschatology. But right now, I don't know enough about it. That's the first point. Second point is that maybe in the future, India will play a very important part in geopolitics. I hope it does, but right now it doesn't, okay? So Israel, America, Russia, Iran are the four major nations that I'm studying right now. And so I want to expand outwards. So first I want to understand these four nations, and then I will expand outwards to include India as well, okay? So it's not that I am, it's not that I don't think highly of Vedic eschatology, it's just like I don't know enough about it to comment on it, okay? This is from Christy. What are you and your family doing in preparation for what is coming when the world seems to be falling apart, when there's energy price, food shortage, AI surveillance state. Well, I have a family. My wife is here. We have 3 kids. And the answer is we're focusing on loving each other as much as possible. My wife and I spend most of our time talking about our children and thinking about how to make them happy. Because we believe our children can be resilient, can be imaginative. But our responsibility as parents is to make sure they're loved enough in the house, in the time they're with us, so that there's strength to surmount any difficulty. Okay? So our strategy is not to make $1 billion and then build a bunker and then hope that we are safe in this bunker. That gets you nowhere. Our strategy is to have faith in our children, understand that once our children grow up, it's entirely their choice how to live their lives. We will not intervene. We will not interfere in their own path. And in their time with us, our responsibility is to make sure they're as loved as much as possible, okay? So that's where our priority is. Number 2, you mentioned the U.S. will introduce stable coins in China, and the U.S. will do everything it can to keep USD valuable. Does that mean gold is no longer a safety haven or store or value going forward like it had been for hundreds of years? Gold. Well, I don't buy gold. I don't even want to buy gold. Okay, and the reason why is that you're using money in order to buy things to solve everyday problems. Gold is a store of value because you obviously can't use gold to go to the convenience store and buy a bottle of water. That's just retarded, okay? So if you have a lot of money and you have no place to put your money, then you should put it in gold or real estate. The problem is, imagine a world in which there's a lot of instability, when there's a lot of chaos, when the population is declining. Well, in that scenario, well, your problem isn't how much money you have, because the value of gold is going to go down in value because there's less demand, there's less people. Your problem is, how do I maintain my faith in myself? How do I have the strength to surmount the psychological turmoil of chaos? How do I find the courage to go work with other people in order to rebuild a new world? Okay, so it's really about spiritual energy as opposed to material wealth. All right, number 3. You will mention there'll be a depression after the fall of the petrodollar, but then you mentioned that U.S. will force China and other countries to purchase gas from the U.S. so that people will keep buying U.S. debt and rely on the U.S. dollar. Do you see an economic depression happening worldwide due to the downfall of U.S. dollar, or will this crisis be averted due to the U.S. forcing others to buy its gas? Yes, I did mention the United States has a strategy of forcing the entire world to buy its gas and its oil. I didn't say it was going to work. In fact, I probably said it was not going to work because when you do something like this, when you try to control the entire world and force it to do its bidding, it's basically blow up in your face, okay? So yes, in theory, if the United States forces the world to buy its oil, then the United States could maintain the petrodollar. The problem is that the United States is doing this not for the national interest. The United States is doing this in order to promote the interests of certain factions and interest groups within the American elite. Okay? This is a very important distinction. The people in charge don't care if there's an economic depression. And an economic depression just means that you can buy things for really cheap. Okay? It also means that you can enforce an authoritarian state upon the nation because people will be desperate. So they're doing what they're doing in order to obtain more wealth and more money for themselves. Right? So Trump is doing what Trump is doing, not to save America, but to help his friends. And once you understand that, then you understand just because they're going to do this does not mean the United States will not collapse economically. They don't care if the United States collapses economically. Number 4, I'm from New Zealand, which is a country that's not been mentioned in your lectures, although all your charts seem to show that New Zealand will be quite badly affected by the Iran war. Do you see New Zealand joining NATO in the fight against Ukraine? I read news that billionaires are building bunkers in New Zealand. Does that mean we will be somewhat safe from future conflicts? What will New Zealand do? I'm just an everyday citizen wanting to do the best for my children here. Okay. New Zealand is an interesting, because New Zealand is very much like Canada and Australia. Okay, these 3 places, New Zealand, Australia, Canada. They're not nation states. They are resource colonies of the British Empire. Okay, meaning that they're owned, literally owned by the British. So their resources, their wealth belongs to the British. And so what's happening in these countries right now is a corporate restructuring where the population is being replaced. All right, the populations there have become lazy, complacent. And so they're importing millions of new immigrants, primarily Indians, but also a lot of Chinese, a lot of Filipinos, to replace the population. Because in a time of economic decline, you need your colonies to perform better. All right? So I don't see New Zealand participating in any wars, but I do see New Zealand, the population being replaced by immigrants. Okay? And this will probably lead to a lot of civil conflict in these places. All right? From Demi. You mentioned how you used to live with your parents, play video games, and feel disconnected from the world. Was there a particular book, philosophy, or work of art that inspired you towards the path you're on now? What concrete advice do you have for a younger man who feels aimless and nihilistic, who want to get back on a spiritually productive path? Okay, this is a really hard question for me to answer. Yes, it is true that in my late 20s, I was very depressed, and I felt that life was hopeless, and I feel as though you have to go through stages like this in your life. So it's not something to be avoided. It's something that you'll have to suffer through. And when you hit rock bottom, you instinctively or you intuitively understand that I need to move on in my life. Okay? So during this time period, what I did was I engaged in a period of self-reflection in which I questioned my assumptions about the world. I went to Yale University, and after I went to Yale University, I thought the world was meritocratic. It was logical that if you worked hard, if you have talent, then you succeed in life. And then after floundering through life in my 20s, I had many years where I became very depressed, and I just thought about my own life, and I recognized that I need to have a better understanding, a more nuanced understanding of how the world works. And this led me to the journey that has led me to today, okay? So failure is not something to be ignored or avoided or to be feared. It's something to be embraced, okay? Don't fear failure. If there's a work that has had the most influence on me these past 10, 20 years, it would be Dante, the Divine Comedy, okay? But that's very hard to read. So in mid-June, I will teach a 2-week seminar, line by line, close reading of Dante's Divine Comedy. And what I'm hoping to do is inspire people to engage in their own self-reflection and to think much more deeply about their own purpose in this world, okay? And hopefully this will help people in the future. Hey, from Alex. I don't disagree with the notion that AI is an occult project, but I find there's a curious similarity between what you call the occult and the sentiment of courage that a scientist or inventor must have in pursuing the development of some revolutionary technology that they truly believe is a benefit for humanity. I don't disagree with this. I think that if you want to be a true scientist, your imagination must involve the occult. If you're a great scientist like Isaac Newton was, you're not interested in creating a patent or an invention that will make you $1 billion. You don't care about that. You want to know the mind of God. You want to change the world forever. That's what leads to tremendous inspiration and imagination. In your lecture on the Holy Empire of AI, you interpreted the quote from Peter Thiel's 0 to 1 as an invitation to start a secret society and to access the occult as a way to dominate the world. I don't necessarily disagree with your interpretation, However, I find a similarity between the passage you quote from Thiel and another book called The Hero with a Thousand Faces by Joseph Campbell. Exactly. So all these heroic figures in history, they all have similar characteristics. They all believe that they are on a mission, a secret mission from God, and they must create a movement around them in order to advance humanity. Yes. Okay. Yes. I don't disagree with your intuition, in particular about lumping the cult, society, world dominance, religion, and AI into one basket. Yet I point out that all true innovation is a cult in nature. I completely agree with this. You have to understand a cult if you want to be innovative. That's why I teach it. And the cult is agnostic to whether your intention is to access it for the benefit of mankind or to access it with the intention or dominate the world. Exactly. So when I teach Starling, I teach people like, God has given us free will. Free will means you can do good, you can do evil. He doesn't care, okay? Doesn't matter. For everyone, and it just happens that the most visible tech voices seem bent on using technology to dominate the world. This is exactly correct, okay? So people who are truly innovative, there's a diversity among them. But the people who will succeed are those who are most aligned with power and control. Okay? So if you love making money, then guess what? You'll be successful. But if you want to help humanity, guess what? You won't be successful. Okay? So there's almost like a direction to history. If you follow that direction, you almost like a right away to power. So people who are extremely greedy, like Mark Zuckerberg, Steve Jobs, Larry Ellison, they'll be much more successful than people like me, who's much more interested in educating people. Okay? And that's the reality of the world we live in. But the thing to remember is that God wants it this way, because only by giving us complete free will can we be truly imaginative. All right? And I could be doing what I'm doing unless there are evil people like Mark Zuckerberg doing what he's doing. All right? So what's important is the free will. All right, so Alan, can you help me read this, please?
Okay. A question from a 21U American male. Do you believe an American draft is still coming, Professor Zhang? Many young American men follow you, and those who are willing to take drastic action are left wondering what direction to go. If a draft is still coming, is it worth fleeing the US this summer? Do you have any general edition advice for young men? Thank you.
Okay, first of all, I do believe the draft is coming. But not only that, but I believe that the draft is coming to many countries, including Canada, Australia, Europe. And you think that the purpose of a draft is to fight a war. But you think about it deeply, the purpose of a draft is to reorganize society in a certain way. So in America today, what do young men do? Well, they buy Bitcoin, they gamble online, they're on OnlyFans, they don't want to work because the pay is too low, and this is a disaster for the country. Young men go to college, and for 4 years they drink beer and watch football games. And they don't learn anything, right? So you have this huge social problem on your hands that young men aren't contributing effectively to your economy. So what you do is you engineer a financial crisis, like the Great Depression, so that you're forced to work because your parents have no more money. And then you have a national draft to teach you skills that you will need in order to contribute more effectively to the economy, okay? So a draft doesn't necessarily mean that you go to war. A draft just means that you work for the government for like 5 to 10 years. And it's possible like they train you to be an engineer in the Navy. Believe it or not, but the best education you can possibly receive is often from the military, because unlike schools, they're incentivized to actually teach you something useful, okay? And it's often for free. So a draft is something that they need in order to basically train young men to be effective contributors to the economy. And it's something that many countries will adopt as well. If you just let young men do whatever they want, they're just going to play video games, spend all their money on OnlyFans, and gamble everything on Bitcoin, okay? And they don't really know anything useful. So this is a huge problem, and that's why they need a national draft to fix this problem. So should you run away if there's a draft? I already told you there's no place to run to, okay? Either you go to a nation with a draft, or you go to a nation which has even worse problems like famine, okay? So, I mean, what's important is to recognize that the world is changing. We're not gonna go back to the old world. Things are not gonna stay the same, and so you must embrace change, all right? A national draft means that if you're useful, they'll keep you alive. If you're not useful, they'll send you to Iran where you'll die. Okay? That's what it means. So make yourself useful. Read books. Learn skills. Work hard. Okay, that's my advice. I'm sorry to be so blunt, but that's the world we live in, okay? All right. John Zach says thank you. Well, thank you, John Zach. All right. Can you read Miguel, Alan?
Professor, what is your take on a Katten AI designed to bypass the false optimization minimum of human extinction? Instead of forcing a stereo piece, it would optimize for minimum conflict energy and maximize creative collaboration. By structurally limiting the harm capacity of non-empathetic actors, could such a framework successfully steer humanity's historical trajectory toward healthy, constructive competition without violating our autonomy?
Yeah, this is a great point. It is possible for AI to do this. The question is, who's going to pay for this, right? If you're a billionaire, the reason why you invest in AI is to have more money, to extend your power and your wealth. And that means to control people better, right? So they're not going to create an AI system that means you don't need government anymore. Government's going to invest in this in order to have more control over people. Okay, so that's the issue that we face. And the reality is that AI is very expensive. You need trillion-dollar data centers in order to run AI effectively. Okay? All right, can you read, Alan?
Thank you for your work, Professor. In the upcoming multipolar world order, do you think the general populace, especially American, is prepared or even capable of making the mental shift and understanding just how much the world is shifting? Or is this something the next generation will only understand?
Yeah, this is a great question. And unfortunately, the reality is that most people will not be able to make this mental shift, especially older people. That's why most people are going to die. If you're not able to make the shift, you're going to die. Okay? Because you rather die than accept a new reality. And it's unfortunate. But a lot of the conflict is going to come from the fact that the world is changing. People in society need to make changes to adapt to this new world. For example, if there's energy shortages, that means we need to share more. There's enough energy to go around, guys, but it means you need to share more. It means you have to make personal sacrifices to make sure that your neighbor has enough to eat. And unfortunately, there's going to be a lot of people, especially baby boomers, who are millionaires. Now, I'm not saying that all baby boomers are millionaires, but I'm saying that baby boomers who are millionaires, they're extremely selfish. They're not going to want to make these changes. They're not going to want to pay more taxes or give up their $1 million mansions so that the world can be better. Okay? And we know this because if they were willing to do this, we wouldn't be in this mess in the first place. So a lot of the conflict is going to come from the fact that you have people in power who will be stubborn, who will be too old to change, and who will be violent in resisting change. Okay? All right. Keep on going.
Hi, Professor. Can you tell a story about one of the times you felt really connected to the monarch and what insight did it give you? Love the lessons. A big hug to you and your family. Take care.
Okay. So there are many, many instances when I felt connected to the monad. But when I teach, I feel connected to the monad. It's a very strange experience. But, you know, the first time I started teaching was like when I was like 20 years old. I was in China. I was not a very good teacher. But when I'm teaching and the students are learning, I can feel them learning, I feel as though we connect back to the monad, okay? So the most gratifying experience I have is when I teach and I see students edified by the teaching, when they see students learning. Okay, that is direct connection to the monad. When you love someone, like I love my wife, I feel connected to the monad. When I hug my child, when I have a newborn, I hug my newborn for the first time, that's connection to the monad. So the monad is with us all the time. It's just, do we choose to connect with it or not? Okay? If you just listen to your heart, then you can easily connect to the monad. Connection to the monad is the greatest happiness in the world. So moments of greatest happiness in our world are when? When we hug someone we love. Okay? When we care for a friend. Your friend is sick and in the hospital, but you spend 2 weeks just by the bedside of your friend. Is that a feeling of pain or pleasure? I think for most people, it's a feeling of deep pleasure that you're helping someone, that you're contributing to the world positively. Okay? All right. Keep on going.
Yeah, okay. Professor Zhang, many discussions around AI focus on surveillance, government control, censorship, and manipulation. But what if that is only the surface layer? As AI, social media, algorithms, governments, collective emotions, and human consciousness began recursively interacting with one another, it feels like we are entering an era where reality itself becomes fragmented and amplified simultaneously. Not just fake news, but entire emotion and psychological ecosystem shaking how different groups perceive truth, identity, memory, and meaning. In the future, do you think humanity risks losing a shared consensus reality altogether? And if so, what anchors human consciousness when billions of people are each interacting with different AI mirrors trained on different values, narratives, and emotions feedback loops? At that point, is AI merely a tool of civilization, or does it become part of civilization's evolving consciousness itself?
Okay, so there's a very famous Canadian media theorist named Marshall McLuhan, and his famous saying is, the medium is the message. And the idea here is that the medium itself, whether it's radio or television or the internet, it shapes the way you perceive yourself and the world. So look at ChatGPT. In theory, ChatGPT is supposed to enhance your imagination because ChatGPT is able to reduce the grunt work, right? It's able to provide you a lot of information and then you're able to build on top of this information. But in reality, what happens is that people become reliant on ChatGPT and you lose your imagination, okay? ChatGPT is not going to make you smarter, it makes you dumber. So why is that? And the answer is the monad. What makes you smart, what gives you your creativity, is your constant connection to the monad. So if you shift your focus from technology and away from your intuition, then you're going to lose. Okay? But why we have ChatGPT, why we have AI is it's a way to structure your thinking in a way that allows the powers that be to control you better. All right? Okay, so remember this idea that all technology in a way reduces your connection to the monad. And therefore all technology is bad in a certain way. Doesn't mean it's useless, but it means it's going to dampen your connection to the monad. What strengthens your connection to the monad is other people. All right, okay? And yourself. So if you really want to be creative, you really want to explore and understand humanity, take long walks in the park. Talk to strangers. Read a lot of books. Okay? All right, let's keep on going.
Question: how do you define beauty, and how should general public members pursue beauty in the current world?
Beauty is the divine. Okay? Beauty is connection to the divine. Beauty is a glimpse into the divine. Beauty are these sparks that are permanent throughout the world. Okay? And so beauty are experiences that change you for the better because they shock you into a new reality. And so beauty would include the great books, Homer, Dante. It could include an experience that you have that forever changes you. Okay? That's how I would define beauty. All right, keep on going.
Great to be part of this. I have several questions. Please pick whatever you like.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Let me just pick one random, okay? What happens if Saudi Arabia says on building its new pipeline? No, well, then Iran would just blow it up, okay, guys? It's a desert, okay? You have to build things in a desert. It's pretty easy to blow things up in a desert. There's no place to hide. Pipelines are very easy to blow up because there's a lot of energy inside, right? Just a ballistic missile, boom, the thing is blown up, all right? Okay. All right, let's go to Shelly.
You have discussed Pax Judaica many times, the idea of Israel as the center hub of a new regional order. But Pax Silica reframes Israel as merely a node in the broader US-led technology and supply chain architectures, not the dominant power. What is your take on Pax Silica?
Okay, all right. So, Pax Judaica is Israel is at the center of the Middle East, okay? Pax Silica, the idea is that artificial intelligence, backed by silicon, is the new world power. The problem with Pax Silica is that it's really a trade network. Now, trade networks are often very, very fragile. Trade networks requires the cooperation of different nation states to maintain its coherence. And what we know from history is that power comes from the nation state. Okay? So unless you have a nation state backing Pax Silica, it's not going to work. So you can say that behind Pax Silica will be Pax Judaica. That's a possibility, but then Pax Judaica is in charge, okay, not Pax Silica. All right? So the idea that you can have an independent, autonomous trading system to produce AI, it can't work. Okay? Ultimately, you need a nation state to back it with military power, with resources, with people. All right? Okay, let's keep on going with Isaiah.
Awesome day, John and wife. Thanks for the love you have shared together to create such treasured content and family. I'm going to list some topics and cues, and I'd like to know the most important things you like to share about each one you choose. 1. Unconditional love. 2. The good side of Kabbalah. 3. Non-dual awareness. 4. Fertilized crisis.
Okay, all right, sorry. So I'm sorry. This is like way too long. I appreciate the question, but this is going to take too long, okay? So let me just look at the top two. Unconditional love. Unconditional love is something that once you achieve, it changes you forever, okay? And you basically achieve unconditional love when you have a child for the first time. Because you have to love your child unconditionally. Because a child is without experience, okay? The good side of Kabbalah, there are many good sides of Kabbalah. I don't understand why Kabbalah is put in such a negative light. But Kabbalah, it's a very powerful way of understanding the world and forces you to think very deeply about your place in the world. Look, the reality is that if you go to American University, there are two ethnic groups that are pretty dominant in academia in America. They are the Indians and the Jews. The Indians have a Vedic tradition, the Jews have a Kabbalah tradition. This is not an accident, okay? If you really want to be creative, and we've said this in the past, you need to understand the occult. The Kabbalah forces you to wrestle with the occult and recognize that beyond the mature world, there are these deep mystical questions that can guide your life. And by dealing with these questions not only will help you better understand your place in the world, but they will also advance your own scientific inquiry. Okay? All right.
Okay.
Can you keep going?
Yeah.
Just read this. My question is, what do you think?
Yeah. My question is, what do you think of the Yuga cycle? And according to universal laws, why do institutions like the Roman Empire to exist? The Kabbalah speaks of Earth being a centrifugal forge, essentially the Earth being cycles upon cycles upon cycles, Fibonacci sequence, samsara, etc.
Okay, stop. Okay, all right. So this is a really important idea where for thousands of years, humans have come to an understanding, which is the world works in cycles. You rise, you fall. You live, you die. There's summer, there's winter. There's nothing you can do about this. What is hubris? What is stupid? What is arrogant is to believe that you can stop history, you can end history, and that can only lead to destruction. Okay? So that's a world we live in today where it is natural for the American empire to decline and to go away. That's just human history. That's just a cycle. But they're suffering because the American empire refuses to go away. It refuses to die. And therefore, we must suffer. Okay? But there's nothing that you can do about this. And the more you resist, the greater the pain, the quicker the fall. Okay? And this is something that all religions teach us. Just accept the life cycle. Okay? Saying that empires decline is the same as saying that an earthquake is coming. Okay? Can you stop an earthquake coming? No. You just have to prepare for it. An empire decline, same thing. It's just a natural cycle. Okay? All right. This is from Sarah.
Yeah. Date noted, I'm very interested in the live streams. I hope it is the basics for the school you would like to build up. I'm gonna be present, thinking of good question for the last class. Thank you.
Great. So yeah, exactly. I'm very excited about our first live stream, which is scheduled for next Sunday at 9 a.m. in Beijing time. That'll be like 9 p.m. in New York on the East Coast. I understand that there'll be many people around the world who will not be able to participate in the live stream, especially people from Europe. Okay, but the idea is that we'll change the timing of the live stream as time goes by. Okay, in order to accommodate more people. But Sarah is absolutely right. I'm doing this in order to form the basis of a school community, and this is all an experiment. But we'll try the first live stream next Sunday, June 7th. Okay. So I'll send a note to all founding members that we'll be doing this live stream as an experiment. And then after June 7th, a week later, I'll do a live stream for all paid subscribers on Substack. All live streams will be eventually uploaded to my YouTube channel, so no one will miss the content. But during the live stream, only founding members or paid subscribers will be able to participate. Okay? All right, keep on going.
Hello, Professor. I want to begin by saying your lectures have given me an
Sorry, can you just go to the question?
Okay. My question focuses on the takeaway from Danton's Divine Comedy and the great books, specifically the argument that we can only move closer to the divine, unlock our imagination, and find the motivation to achieve greatness by directing our love toward another human soul. How does this framework account for individuals who find this exact same spiritual and creative awakening through non-human subjects? For example, consider someone who grew up isolated, without supportive parents or an interest in romance, but who form a deep, profound attachment to colors, sounds, or concepts. If their intense love for painting, music, sports, or technology provides the exact same drive and beautiful imagination, can that abstract devotion serve as an equivalent path to the source? Are they not adding to the imagination of the universe and expanding it as well?
Okay, this is a really good point. Yes, it is true that in Divine Comedy, I say that the way to activate our love, our connection to the monad, is by connecting with another person, by loving that person unconditionally, like a child or a mother or a partner. But what if you are, for whatever reason, alone in the world, and you are nonverbal? You express yourself through colors, and you can still connect to the monad. The monad is still in you, okay? And you're right. There are lots of people who are like that, like Vincent van Gogh, who produced tremendous artwork. Okay, so the point is that anyone and everyone can produce great beauty in the world because of our connection to the monad. The question is, as a society, how tolerant, how generous, how loving are we? Okay? And the more generous, the more tolerant, the more loving we are as a society, the greater our creativity. And so the example I use would be autistic children in schools. I have researched autistic children. They're not that different from you and me. They just have limited emotional regulation, meaning like they make noises in class. But teachers don't accept that. It's like, no, if you're making noises in class, then you are a problem. Therefore, you should be on medication. Okay? So that's the society that we live in today, which is extremely intolerant, which is extremely selfish, very individualistic. And so if we're truly to love every child, then we need to transform our society that is much more loving and generous. Okay? All right. Keep on going.
Which part? Okay. Professor, thank you for everything you have done and what you continue to do. In your lecture, Trump World Order, you discuss a potential grand plan being carried out by Trump. From my understanding, you believe that the failures of the US in the Middle East may ultimately lead to a decline of the US empire globally, but the rise of the American nation in this scenario, US will be forced to retreat and return focus on the Americans where there is an abundance of natural resources. Being forced to retreat, the American global empire is hurt significantly, but it may be better for the actual citizens of America. By focusing internally, America will stop overextending itself abroad, which will actually help the country. Do you truly believe this is Trump playing 4D chess, or is this just a lucky result where America basically stumbles into success in the Americans? Is there an unknown party behind Trump that is driving him to make these decisions?
Okay, Trump is not playing 4D chess, okay? Trump is stupid. He's playing 4D chess in American politics where he's trying to get a third term, okay? That's what he wants. But the idea that Trump has this grand vision how to make America great again, that doesn't really work, okay? What America is doing, what it's doing is, this is how an empire behaves in decline. An empire would prefer to control the world through soft power. And this is true for the past few decades, where America could control the world through Hollywood, through newspapers like the New York Times, through an image that America is a benevolent power, okay? And for the longest time, that was the case. But now that the world is turning against America, America has no choice but to use force to make people obey its will. When you do that, eventually the world is going to unite against you, okay? So this is not about America shifting strategy, making America great again. This is about an empire in decline will always use force in order to maintain its advantage over the world. The problem with this is that once you leave the world, once you retreat back into your own territory, then the conflicts among the elite become internalized. So before, the conflicts could be projected overseas, okay, to reduce the conflicts internally. Once they retreat back, then they're forced to fight each other, okay? And who's the people behind Trump? Was the people who want to use American power in order to promote their own interests. And this includes oil companies like Exxon. This includes Silicon Valley, who want to create an AI surveillance state. Okay, this includes a military-industrial complex that wants to expand itself. Okay? Okay, this is from Carlos.
A lot of conceptions that I hear in your classes about social economics and materialism remind me of Karl Polanyi's thoughts. Do you know his writings? Are you inspired by him in some way? Do you think China was some way able to surpass its elite corporations of the Western model and achieve some fair wealth distribution and energetic transition? Is China's elite also ruled by secret societies?
Okay, so China's elite is not ruled by secret society, it's ruled by certain families. Okay, this is very different because families don't have eschatologies, they have bloodlines. Secret societies do have eschatologies, meaning there's less energy in China. China's just interested in maintaining the status quo, where secret societies are interested in achieving certain eschatologies, okay? Will China be able to surpass its elite cooperation of the Western model and achieve some fair wealth distribution and energy transition? No, okay? No. China is on decline. And this is something that cannot be averted. Listen, I personally think that China is a historical accident. Okay? There are many things about China that should have been destroyed a long time ago. but because China has been historically isolated from the rest of the world, China has been in East Asia, protected by the sea, the mountains, Great Wall. It really was not in competition with the rest of the world. Okay, so I'm not really that optimistic about China. Okay, Mark?
Dear Professor, thank you for your lectures. They have shaped the way I think and approach new things I learn. I recently wrote an essay on Serbia that develops a model I believe may resonate with some of the themes you teach. If you happen to have the time to read it, I would be honored to hear your thoughts, especially on whether the framework feels coherent and useful.
Okay, so this is from Mark, and I did read the essay. Okay, and the essay is about how Serbia can try to navigate, negotiate, and balance the different powers that surround it, including Russia, including Europe. And it's a very interesting point. The point I will make is that if you really want to know how resilient a society is, don't worry about how carefully it navigates diplomacy, okay? Just ask yourself 3 questions. Is this society energetic? Meaning, do people in the society work hard? Do they take work seriously? Second is this society open-minded? Meaning, is it willing to learn from its mistakes? Is it willing to be humble and innovative? The third question is it cohesive? Meaning that there's a coherent ethnic identity that binds the people together and makes them want to sacrifice themselves for each other, okay? If Serbia has answered these 3 questions, then Serbia, no matter what it does, will have a good future. Okay? I don't know enough about Serbia to comment, but those are the 3 questions you want to ask. And everything else is not really that important. All right, this is from Wild Enkidu.
Why are people obsessed with games? Why are games such a useful framework for understanding ourselves and our world? Can a game still be considered a game if it has no limitations, only players and incentives?
Yeah, this is a really interesting question. So I use game theory as a way to frame human behavior, okay? But it doesn't necessarily mean that people are themselves using game theory. Game theory just helps me make certain predictions about the world. Okay, that's my first point. My second point is that games is a way for us to socialize with each other. Okay, and I don't know what it is, but we live in a world in which status really matters. But this has not always been historically true. So you go back, a few thousand years when most of the world was actually matriarchal. Okay, and that was not a game-based society. Matriarchal societies tend to be very cooperative, and it really is about balance and harmony, making sure everyone gets along. Now that we move to a patriarchy, and where status is a zero-sum game, then you're forced to play games in order to achieve status, okay? So games aren't the natural state of humanity. They're a natural state of humanity for now, but not in the past, and maybe not in the future, okay? All right, this is from Adil.
Professor Zhang, thank you again for your Zarathustra lecture and your broader work on civilizational strategy. One thing I appreciate about your analysis is that you take seriously the psychological and historical stories societies tell about themselves, not just economics or military capacity. Lately, I've been wondering whether a lot of modern geopolitics is really about preserving civilization meaning and legitimacy. Americans still depend on the story about liberalism, freedom, and historical progress. China depends on the idea of national rejuvenation after humiliation. Russia sees itself as a civilization with a spiritual and historical mission distinct from the West. Iran draws on Kabbalah, martyrdom, Shia, and older Persian memory through the
Let's just skip to the last point, okay?
Okay. So my question is, how do you think civilizations can tell when their founding narratives are still helping them remain coherent and reality-oriented versus when those same narratives begin insulating them from reality and pushing them towards self-deception?
Okay, so I think that the best civilizations the strongest civilizations are those that have stories that are universal, that they're able to connect with other cultures, that they're able to transcend time and space. And that's why these four particular civilizations, America, Russia, Iran, and Israel, are so powerful because their stories resonate across time and across space. America is one fundamentally based on the individual, freedom of the individual to pursue his or her ambition, right? Russia is about community, tradition, orthodoxy. Iran is about sacrifice, about eschatology. Israel is about covenant, about history. And these themes resonate throughout time and space. And that's why right now we're seeing a conflict among these four different traditions to see who will win. It's not really clear to me which story will ultimately triumph, okay? All right. Francisco.
Okay. Hello, Professor. A fundamental.
Wait, sorry. You know what? Okay, so the question is there a fine line between stories that unite and stories that maybe blind you from the larger reality? And I know this is going to be strange, okay? But my intuition tells me like the more cohesive the story is, the more it's able to transcend time and space. Okay? And that's why, and this is really interesting, is let's just say the entire world is destroyed tomorrow. 10,000 years from now, humanity rebuilds itself. Guess what, guys? You have the same narrative, the same stories, the same conflicts between freedom and tradition, between history and the future. Okay? This is what humanity is fundamentally about. We're trying to work out the stories that we tell ourselves. Okay? All right, this is from Francisco.
A fundamental question about a pattern on a global perspective, and one that intrigues me concerning the issue of civilization. From other videos of the past about history, from the evolution of humankind and the tragedy of writing, to the patriarchal shift and suggestions that the Indo-European victory brought about, as well as the expansion.
Okay, can you just read the question?
Yeah. Given this, in your opinion, what are the benefits of civilization and empire, or are they inherently evil and anti-human?
Okay, stop. Okay, all right. Okay. So a major problem with how history is taught, how we think about the world is we apply labels to things, okay? Like good, bad, beneficial, not beneficial. That's not how history works, okay? History works in cycles, rise, fall, up, down, civilization, and then barbarity, okay? There's something good or bad about these things. If there's an earthquake, we don't say it's bad, is it good? There's a storm, is it good or bad? It's just part of the world we live in. So stop assigning values and labels to these things, accept that there's a pattern to these things. And our role, our purpose in this world is to navigate these patterns to seek our own individual meaning in this world, okay? The world could collapse tomorrow. That does not absolve your responsibility to be a good teacher, to be a good parent, to be a good neighbor. Okay, focus on what you do individually and don't give labels to these things. Is America good or bad? America is just America. Is Russia good or bad? It's just Russia. Okay? Just keep that in mind. Okay, this is from Hominan.
Isn't there a possibility that there are more nation-states with culture and popular cohesion that can effectively combat the international capital elites that we imagine? For instance, Iran is an extreme case of the resilience, but recently Spanish Prime Minister and South Korean President have been vocally criticizing Israel's anti-humanitarian actions. Assuming that this is the case, do you see your predictions more or less unchanged, or do you think they need to be corrected to be less extreme?
This is a great point, okay? Yes, I do oversimplify like my analysis. the world is extremely complex. There's like a million data points you can choose from. I choose from like a few. Okay? And you're exactly right in that I need to consider more factors, more possibilities, and more data points. And I will in the future. It's just like what's really important for me is to first build a framework, the skeleton, and then work from there. Okay? And that's why I do what I do. Because you always want to start with a framework. Because the framework allows you to make better observations. Don't be too concerned about being factual. And this is an argument I'm going to have with a lot of people where, like, I'm so obsessed with making predictions that I'm not very factual. Well, what's important is to first build the framework, okay, the skeleton, and then build from there. Whereas if you just focus on the facts, it doesn't really get you that many places, okay? So you're absolutely right that I need to consider more data points, and I need to make my arguments more nuanced and more subtle, and I will in the future. All right, this is from TXC.
Yeah. Professor Zhang, your game theory approach consistency drives toward a coherent conclusion of US decline, Chinese vindication, Iranian resilience. In the spirit of the brutal skepticism you ask for, what specific 12-month outcome, concrete and falsifiable, would prove your macro thesis of structural fuel gas decline wrong?
This is a great question. I want to thank you so much for this question. This is exactly the sort of question I'm looking for my audience, okay? Yes, because I'm always looking to invalidate my theory. So what could happen in the next 12 months that would destroy my predictions? Okay, all right. So the US midterms is something that I can't really predict will happen. Okay, it's entirely possible the US midterms will surprise me in a way that will have to change my predictions. I don't know how it will surprise me, but it's possible, okay? If Trump were to die tomorrow, that would change a lot of my predictions, okay? Because I'm predicting Trump will get a third term, okay? If Trump were to die tomorrow, that would change the entire world. If the Democratic Party in the United States picked a leader who was as charismatic as Trump, who was revolutionary as Trump, then I would think that my entire worldview is wrong, that we can avert the collapse of history, that America could regenerate itself. Unfortunately, I think the most hopeless part of the United States right now is the Democratic Party. But if the Democratic Party were to say, you know what, screw this elitist politics, let's get rid of Obama, let's get rid of Clinton, let's have a real democracy and pick a leader from the grassroots who can lead us forward. That I would think would be the greatest thing in the world, okay? Will it ever happen? Probably not. Okay, keep on going.
Is there a prediction you made in the last 18 months that contradicted your directional thesis? Lately, cyclical history models, Athens, Rome, tend to project present onto the past to pattern March. How do you account for drastically different inputs today, AI labor displacement, climate change, space race, etc., in your model? What's your confidence that our current transition is a historical analog via truly uncharted territory? Thank you.
Okay, so for me the question is, do we believe that we're truly in a new age of humanity where AI could lead us to a new future? Or is it possible like we discount the complexity and the sophistication of ancient civilizations like the Athenians and the Romans? Is it possible that they also have technology that they thought could be life-transforming and which would allow them to transcend history? I think that it's much more likely we ignore the sophistication of the past and overemphasize our own sophistication. There's something about AI that tells me that we're heading towards a new future. I think AI is just another hocus pocus hallucination meant to fool us into obedience. And there might also be an alien invasion, okay? So there's something really about the world that we live in that I think makes us distinct from the past. All right. Okay, from Dan.
I've watched every single one of your videos over the last year, some of them 2 or 3 times. I'm curious as to why there is nearly no mention of white supremacy and structural racism woven into historical and contemporary analysis. Quite literally, I do not think the words white supremacy have been said once. Does geopolitical game theory supersede white supremacy and structural racism? Do the latter function more as a tool of domestic management of nation rather than a cohesive fabric throughout the world? Do you view them as identity politics more so than patent issue of our times?
Okay, so white supremacy does exist. Structural racism does exist. I know because I grew up in Canada. And if you grew up in Canada as an immigrant, there's a lot of white supremacy. There's a lot of structural racism in Canada, even though they don't admit it, okay? The reason why these things exist is it's an outgrowth of empire. This is an outgrowth of the stories, the narratives that bind a nation together, okay? So a lot of what's happening in the world today is, for the longest time, white people were in charge. Everyone wanted to be white. And then you have the rise of China, you have the rise of a multipolar world, and then these countries, the United States, Canada, Europe, they became much more decadent, much more corrupt, and then they start to see their white supremacy decline relative to other cultures. And they didn't like that, okay? But I don't like to frame it as white supremacy because that's not the root of the problem. The root of the problem is just empire, imperial arrogance, hubris, civilization, okay? So, I mean, would Chinese supremacy be better than white supremacy? Would Japanese supremacy be better than white supremacy? I don't necessarily think so, okay? It's just like, we are part of a culture. It is right and good for us to be proud of our culture and to think that we are superior in many ways. That's what often leads to cultures to greatness. Okay, so there's always going to be a struggle over supremacy, and this is what leads to conflict. Okay, so yes, white supremacy does exist, but again, I don't think that's the root of the problem. The root of the problem is that people want to belong in community, and people want to believe that their stories in this community are more legitimate than other stories. Okay, and to ask people to just be completely open-minded and be non-racist, I think goes against human nature. All right, this is from Sean.
Hello, Professor Zhang. Thanks for all that you do. I have a layered question. You talk about Plato's caves a lot, and it mostly makes sense to me, but I get a little confused about the illusion part. Is the material world itself the illusion, as in one's own hand, the device on which I'm writing this, the building, etc., or is society with its arbitrary rules the illusion? As if these things aren't real, why do they impact and influence us on such a deep level? Thank you again, Professor. I didn't think I was very interested in history or geopolitical speculations until watching your courses. So I'm very grateful to you for living your truth and your family for inspiring you. Take care.
Yeah, okay, so first of all, society is complete illusion. Okay, when you come to school, you're just taught nonsense. You're taught all this illusion. Okay, what allows society to function is the fact that you comply to the rules, which are illusions. Okay, so the point of school, the point of media, the point of culture is to make you believe that these illusions are real. And you want them to be real because if they're not real, then you can't really function in society. Okay, so that's pretty obvious to people. Okay, the social rules are just illusions, and we know they're illusions because once you recognize these illusions, they're illusions. These taboos are just illusions. It allows you to better navigate society. Okay, so last semester we talked about Frankism, Jacob Frank, and that's what he teaches his followers. Look, everything around you is just an illusion. Okay? Do whatever you want. And once you are able to enforce your will on other people, you can achieve what you want because people are just surrounded by illusions. Okay? There's nothing real to what they believe in. So it's very easy for you to impose your own illusions on other people. Okay? But the deeper question is this mature world an illusion? And it is an illusion. What is real, and I keep on emphasizing this in this class, is that it's consciousness that is real. Our hands, our eyes, these are the illusion. But that's a very hard thing to appreciate, okay? That's why we have secret societies. That's why there's these mystery schools in ancient Greece, because to convince someone that your mind is more real than your hand, they think you're insane, okay? But once you're able to make this divine or mental leap, your entire world changes, okay? Now you're able to access truth, really. But the reality is that 99% of us will not be able to make this realization, okay? To discover for yourself that, oh my God, it's my consciousness that is real. But everything I see around me, this material world, these buildings, this money, this wealth, it's all just a fake, okay? All right, I've been able to do so, but it's hard, okay? This is from Lazar.
Yeah. Hello, Professor Zhang, a new subscriber here. Looking forward to reading more of your geopolitical analysis. I wanted to ask, are you going to maybe cover the future of Europe and Balkans in one of your analysis? It is a region that was the most unstable in Europe, at least in recent history. When talking about the big players, you also mentioned how the smaller regions and sub-regions relate towards Russia, China, US, like South American, parts of African, smaller Asian countries, etc. Recently, China has been kind of using Balkans as an entry into Europe with their infrastructure investments. Right after Trump's and Putin's visit to China, President of Serbia also visited China and received a medal from Xi, and only 12 other leaders received. Also, the visit was on the headlines of Chinese media too.
Okay, yeah, so exactly right. The Balkans has historically been one of the most important and volatile regions of the world. So the Middle East is probably the most volatile, but the Balkans are also very volatile for very similar reasons, okay? One reason is just the geographic necessity of the Balkans. It is an access point to many continents. Second is the religious conflict in the area. You have many different religious groups fighting for control over that area. And the third is the historical animosity built up over the centuries of conflict. So we can expect that the conflict between Russia and Europe will converge again in the Balkans. But I don't know enough about the area to comment specifically, okay? I was expecting a major conflict to rise in that region as a proxy war between Russia and Europe. But the specifics, I don't really want to discuss, okay? Again, in the future, what I want to do is explore more of the world and really try to understand the different communities in this world. Okay. All right. Keep on going.
Yeah. If Tucker Carlson left Fox over the 2020 election domination trial, and you say Maduro was captured to testify that they helped rigger the 2020 election, what did you and Tucker discuss off air after he got emotional? Thought on Larry Johnson and other CIA agents and boomer analyst criticism toward yourself. And I agree, your great books list is great, but more sources and any channels you recommend would be great. Seems you draw or are tapped into a similar vein as Simulated Leviathan in regard to the links between Kabbalah, Hollywood, and AI. Thanks again, Professor. Love your work. Looking forward to seeing your next chapter. Best of luck.
So I was on Tucker Carlson's show a couple months ago, and he got very emotional because I think that he is an American patriot. I've always admired and respected Tucker Carlson, even though politically we don't align, okay? He and I will disagree a lot on politics, but I admire the fact, and I respect the fact that he loves America, and he's fought very hard to protect what's best about America, especially its civilization, especially its culture. And he's been very consistent about this. Okay, and so for a few minutes when the show ended, we discussed the fact that American culture is being erased. How the very essence of American civilization, what made America great, was really Christianity and European civilization. And because of DEI, because of immigration, a lot of this being eroded, and that's a very bad thing for America. And I agree with that. So what I admire about Tucker Carlson is that he's been very principled in his viewpoint, and he's been fearless and courageous in fighting for what he believes in, including maintaining American civilization, which is Christian and white and European. Also, he's been very consistently anti-war, and that's cost him a lot. In fact, there's talk that because of his anti-war stance, he doesn't believe that America should be fighting this war in Iran, there's talk of him getting arrested. Okay, so I think I've always admired Tucker Carlson. I think he's an extremely courageous man, even though we don't agree. I know that Larry Johnson, another man I also respect a lot, he has been criticizing me. A lot of people have been criticizing me. And quite honestly, I don't pay attention to the criticism because I don't want to be a YouTube star, okay? I don't want to be a social media influencer who spends all his time arguing with other social media influencers. I want to be an educator. I want to teach people how to think for themselves, okay? And that's why I don't involve myself in arguments with other people, okay? Larry Johnson is someone I admire a lot. I've watched a lot of his interviews. I agree with a lot of his sentiments. I don't know what he said about me, and quite honestly, I don't care. Okay, the fact that he doesn't like me, the fact that he criticizes me, doesn't really impact the way I perceive him. Because what I care about are opinions. Okay, what I care about is analysis, and I sort of like ignore the personalities behind that. Okay, all right, Julian.
Thank you very much, Professor, for your lectures and for understanding our world, universe better. My question would be about your theories that secret societies don't understand that they do conspiracy theories in the game Theory 26. The concept you use in that lecture I find very interesting. But more interesting would be when you add to this concept the fallen angels, reptiles, giants, dragon, lost Asian civilization, Tartaria, etc. All these conspiracy theories together to predict our universe.
Look, okay, there's a lot of things I don't know, okay? I'm very interested in the idea of lost ancient civilizations. They must exist, okay? It doesn't make sense to me that, we only have like 10,000 years recorded human history, but we've been around for 200,000 years in our current state, okay? Our current minds, our current mental development. We've been around as modern humans for 200,000 years. So there must have been other civilizations in place. Okay, if you look at the Amazon, if you look at the Grand Canyon in America, if you look at Antarctica, there's reason to believe that there have been other civilizations before us. Okay, so I'm very interested in that. I'm very interested in the concept of fallen angels. The Nephilim. Okay, there might be some interdimensional reptiles who rule us. I'm open to these possibilities, but right now, I haven't found enough evidence to discuss them, okay? I'm very much on my own journey to discover the truth. And I'm open-minded about these things, okay? Can you keep on reading, Alan?
Hi, John. You said multiple times that Israel and Japan will dominate their region. Israel will achieve the Greater Israel Project, and Japan will rebirth from its ashes. The Greatest Israel Project, if I understood what you said in your lecture, I didn't rewatch your lectures, so it's based on my memories. The US will launch a ground invasion of Iran. They will lose. In the process, both the US and Iran will be destroyed. The GCC will be destroyed. And two, since it is just a creation of empire and is not sustainable, CENTCOM will be transferred to Israel. So the last player available is Israel. Okay, but how can Israel achieve its project if Iran annihilates Israel? For example, by destroying desalination plants or energy infrastructures, etc., Israel has nuclear weapons, so it can use it, but Iran can build 10 to 20 of them in a matter of weeks. And we don't know the full capabilities of Iran. Well, we can see what the US and Israel are capable of. We can also add that Israel is energetic, as has high fertility rate, etc., but it doesn't really matter if the country is wrecked. So I'm perplexed about your take.
Okay, I don't understand why Iran wants to destroy Israel. Iran wants to survive. Iran wants to remove the United States from the Middle East. Iran wants to unite the Muslim world. Those things make sense, but why would Iran want to destroy Israel? For what purpose? I don't understand that. Just because of animosity? That's not how geopolitics works, guys, okay? There has to be some very specific reason for why Iran want to destroy Israel. If you look at what's happening, Iran is directing most of its attention against the UAE. Why? Because the UAE, from the Iranian perspective, it is an abomination, okay? It is sacrilege, what the UAE is. It is demonic, okay? The Iranians hate the people in the UAE far more than they hate people in Israel, okay? And the Americans. So I don't understand why Iran would want to destroy Israel. Also, why would Israel want to use a nuclear weapon against Iran? For what purpose? Yes, I understand that if Israel were to nuke Iran, Iran could build nuclear weapons and then go nuke Israel. But why would Israel want to nuke Iran? Israel wants to weaken Iran, but why would it need to use nuclear weapons to weaken Iran? Wouldn't you be better off destroying reservoirs, railways, energy infrastructure? Okay? I don't understand what the purpose of a tactical nuclear weapon would be. Okay? Now, people discuss the possibility of using a tactical nuclear weapon to destroy underground missile bases, yes, but there are lots and lots of underground missile bases scattered throughout Iran. You don't have enough nuclear weapons to destroy these missile bases. Okay? So I don't understand the logic of this. I don't believe Iran cares about Israel enough to commit suicide. Okay? If you go against Israel, Israel will use nuclear weapons against you. Why would Iran want to cross that line if it means the destruction of the civilian population? Okay? And then Israel doesn't really need to destroy Iran. Israel needs to remove the United States from the equation and then deal with Iran at a later stage. Okay? It wants to weaken Iran to a point where Iran has spent a lot of time rebuilding itself. And so my argument is that if a war between Iran and the United States reaches a point where the United States is forced to send millions of ground troops into Iran, it's going to destroy both places, both the United States and Iran. The only person left standing will be Israel at the end. Okay, that's my argument. I still maintain this belief. Okay, keep on going.
2. Japan as a most dominant force in Asia. In one of your lectures about South Korea, you said that the country will collapse because of its low fertility rate. But it is the same for Japan. The population is old and the youngs don't want to make children. The most dominant industrial power in the region is China. Okay, China is an hallucination with low fertility rate, obsessed with money, no
Okay, I understand.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So, when I make predictions, I look at several factors. One factor that I look really closely at is resilience. Okay? So, if things stay the same, yes, I understand China will dominate, Japan will decline. But the thing about history is that there's always change. There's always cycles. And if the world is heading towards disaster, which I think it is heading towards disaster, I ask myself, which nation states will be resilient in that the people will most likely stand together and make changes necessary in order to overcome this adversity. And historically, it's always been Japan. Okay? Japan in the 12th, 13th century was able to survive 2 Mongolian invasions. 19th century, when they were being invaded by the Western powers, they underwent the Meiji Restoration and became an industrial power in about 20, 30 years' time. After World War II, when they were completely destroyed by the Americans, they came together, we changed their political and industrial system before they had something called the Zaibatsu system, which is basically monopolies, industrial monopolies. After World War II, they got rid of those things. They ate the rich, and then reindustrialized. And in about 20, 30 years' time, they became the most advanced industrial economy in the world. Okay, so the Japanese have a history of resilience, of making changes when their survival is threatened. And that's why I think that Japan will probably do it again. Whereas I've not seen an instance of China being resilient. Okay, I have not. Okay, keep on going. This is the last question.
Thank you, Professor, for all the lectures you posted. Also, honorable mention, the YouTube algorithm that managed to draw a lot of us in the beginning to create a critical mass of viewers to start the hype. One question, if you would need to move permanently to another country in the next 6 months, what would be your top 10 and why?
Okay, first of all, because I have a family, I have 3 kids, I would not make any changes lightly. Okay? I would prefer not to move unless I was entirely sure that there's a better option for me, okay? But let's just say, for whatever reason, tomorrow I have to make the move. Where would I go? Well, some countries that come to mind would include Botswana in Africa, because it's like far enough from everywhere. It's a pretty stable society, okay? So Botswana is something to consider. Then you have Chile in South America. I would consider New Zealand, possibly. Malaysia. Okay? So these are 4 places I would consider. If, for the reason, tomorrow World War III breaks out and Europe is on fire, America's attacking everyone, America's in civil war, there's lots of conflict in East Asia between Japan and China, who knows, okay? All right? Okay, so that's it for the founding members, and that took us a lot of time, guys. Okay, so I'm gonna try to do some YouTube questions for another 10 minutes. Okay, and then we'll break because it'll be impossible for me to get through all the YouTube questions. All right. Okay, so this is from Joyce Lai. Space. What's my theory of space? I personally don't think space matters. I personally don't think we'll ever get to the moon. I don't think we'll be able to mine asteroids for resources. I think society will collapse much more quickly than we assume, okay? We just don't have the time, the energy, the resources to go conquer the moon, okay? I think the space race, it's all just an illusion. Space race, AI, alien invasion, they're all just lies perpetuated by the elite. I pay absolutely no attention to the space race. And this is strange because I grew up watching a lot of science fiction. I love science fiction. I read a lot of Isaac Asimov, Ray Bradbury. I watched a lot of science fiction like Star Trek, okay? I love that. So I would love it if we could get to the Mars. We're not getting to Mars, guys, okay? Not gonna happen. I don't care what Elon Musk says, it's not gonna happen. Let's get to the moon first, okay? Let's get the men on the moon first. All right. How can you explain India's position in this chessboard of astrological convergence? India. Look, again, I don't know enough about India to make predictions. But I will say that geopolitically, India is in a very bad position because it has a large population, its political system is very chaotic, and it's very resource constrained. It doesn't have that much resources. So my prediction for India would not be that optimistic, okay? But eventually I want to go visit India and discover for myself the strengths of India. All right. Why do you think the people of Israel have constantly been expelled from 109 countries over the course of history? The Israelites say it's because everyone is envious of them, but is that really true? If a kid is expelled from 109 schools, are the schools at fault or is the issue with the kid? Okay, so this is actually a question that a lot of people, I think, are really interested in. Okay, so let me spend some time to explain what's going on. So the Israelites have the Bible. And the Bible commands them to be forever loyal to God. And over the course of history, most Israelites have been absorbed into different communities, like the Christians and the Muslims, okay? And a lot convert themselves to Greek Hellenism, or this abandoned Judaism because they wanted to join the elite. So it's only been a minority, a very small minority, that has kept the Jewish faith alive over the centuries. And as you imagine, these people are fanatical. Okay, so imagine like just a small community. A small community. And so the main problem is like, how do you endure? Because their faith teaches them that what matters is their faith in God. They're the chosen people. How can they endure as a people? And so what happened in history is they basically made a deal with the devil. And what I mean by that is they made a deal with local nobility to serve them in exchange for being able to practice their faith. Okay? The deal often it goes like this. Nobility will hire them as subcontractors to manage their wealth. The Jews are a diaspora, okay? So what they're really good at are trade and finance. Also, throughout most of human history, nobility were not allowed to engage in usury. Okay? Why? Because usury led to often to the destruction of society. Okay? When you collect interest on debt, the debt often multiplies to an extent that no one can pay it off, which often leads to revolution. But the problem is that usury was the most profitable enterprise you can engage in, okay? So what the nobility did, which was very clever, is say, let's get the Jews to go do it, okay? So the Jews are not allowed to own property, go to school, but they're allowed to engage in usury, basically finance. Okay? So this was a deal that a lot of Jewish communities made with European nobility. As you can imagine, this is going to be a problem because when times are good, that's fine. But when times are bad, people are going to get angry. And who do they blame? They blame the Jews, right? Because it's not the nobility that's collecting debt from you. It's the Jews that are collecting debt from you. And the Jews think they are the chosen people, so they set themselves apart from you. They live in their own communities. They practice their own religion. And they think they're better than you, okay? And this is going to lead to a lot of conflict. So again, when times are good, it's fine. But when times are bad, the Jews always get blamed. And again, history goes in cycles. And so whenever there's a bad time, the Jews get expelled from a certain location and they move elsewhere where they restart again. But they don't care because for them, their mission is to endure, to keep the faith. Okay? And over the centuries, they've learned certain strategies of how to endure. Okay? And a lot of this is basically segregation, where they keep themselves separate from other people, and they basically think that other people are dirty or whatever. Okay, I'm not saying all Jews, but like they have these traditions in place in order to endure. And a lot of these strategies tend to be very extreme. Okay, and unfortunately, we're seeing the same pattern emerge again in today's world, where anti-Semitism is now a very common thing around the Western world. Okay, not just because of what Israel is doing, but because of certain cultural practices of the Jews. Okay? That said, I have tremendous respect and admiration for the Jewish people because they are first and foremost intellectual people, people of the book, who've contributed many great ideas to human history. Okay? All right. Which branch of studies have a future in our modern world? What would you study if you were at the crossroads of life? Okay, one advice I give to people is ignore AI. Okay? If you want to become a computer programmer, if you want to go master AI to become a billionaire, you're gonna be disappointed. If you really want to prepare for the future, read books. Okay? Read the great books, but it doesn't matter. You don't have to read the great books. Just read books, because the skill that you will need in the future is the capacity to think critically, think independently, and think deeply about the world. And by reading books, you can start to engage in inner inner dialogue with yourself. Okay, and that's going to make you much more resilient in the future. So my best advice is, doesn't matter what you study, but what it does matter is to read books. Okay. All right. Could you help me read out?
I want Proof to talk about what advices he would give to his kids in the situation. We are going to collapse and the whole system is going to change. What advice Prof would give to his kids how to prepare themselves for upcoming situations and show how well you prepare your kids for the new world. I would be delighted to hear Professor's answers to these questions.
Okay, so every day I will just tell my kids 3 things, okay? And that's all I have to do. Okay, first thing I will say is I will always love you. No matter what happens, I will always love you. No matter what you do, I will always love you. If I die, I'll still love you, okay? Just know that. Wherever you go, whatever you do, I will always love you and I'll always be with you, okay? That's the first thing I tell my kids. Second thing I'll tell my kids is, I believe in you. Meaning, whatever you do will be good. Just believe in yourself. Okay? All right? And the third thing I will say is, just believe in yourself. And if my kids understand these 3 things, okay? That their parents always love them no matter what they do. That their parents believe in them. And their highest mission in life is to believe in themselves. They'll be fine no matter what. Okay? So it's not really about what university you should go to. It's not really about how much money you have. It's really about how you perceive yourself and your place in the world. And I want my kids to always believe that no matter what they do, no matter where they go, their parents will always love them. Okay, can you help me read out?
My question for the final exam is, if an AI civilian state is the end goal, why is there such a negative feeling in the general population for AI? What primary social, political, or game theoretic factors drive this public resistance, and how does it impact the trajectory of AI deployment?
There's such negativity towards AI because everyone knows what the purpose of AI is. The purpose of AI is to make you, as a human being, worthless, redundant. We don't need you anymore because we have robots, we have AI, okay? And human beings want to feel they're part of something. Human beings want to feel valuable. Human beings want to contribute to the greater good. And AI is a system designed to make you redundant, okay? Keep on going.
You predicted US-China grand bargain, where China absorbs Americans' 39 trillion debts via stablecoins, the Genuine Act, to maintain the global USD hallucination. However, you also taught us that the US grand strategy is to embargo Malacca and use 21st century warfare economic strangulation to force Beijing into submission. If China is already a fragile hallucination with collapsing consumer confidence, what American strangulations can accidentally trigger a total collapse of the CCP? How can Americans extract wealth from the Chinese consumer if their own choke point strategy destroy the Chinese state from within?
Okay, so this is a really interesting question. Okay, so I'll make some certain comments. The first comment I'll make is that if you're a hallucination, you don't know you're a hallucination, okay? You don't. So objectively, this may be true, but the players don't know that it's true. That's the first point I'll make. Second point I'll make is that in the game, your objective is to win the game. Now, by winning the game, it may cause the game to collapse, but you don't care. The point is to win the game. And you'll use whatever tools you have in order to win the game. So it's possible that this US-China trade war will end up collapsing both nations, but that's not the point. The point is to win the game. Okay? The point is not to survive the game, the point is to win the game. And sometimes winning the game means destroying yourself, committing suicide, basically. That's my second point. The third point I will make is that China and America, they need to engage in this sort of struggle in order to come to an agreement. Okay? The reason why is that there's lots of domestic interests that they have to deal with. So for example, if you're Donald Trump and you want a grand bargain with China, there's going to be a lot of people opposed to this because they think that China is the great threat and that any compromise with China means selling out the American nation. Okay, so you need to engage in certain conflict and warfare in order to dissipate or reduce domestic tension in order to advance a deal. Okay, does that make sense? So I understand it's a really dangerous game they're playing, but welcome to geopolitics. This is the way the world works. The people in charge are psychopaths. Because in order to win the game, you have to be a psychopath. Okay? Think about who in this world is respected. Well, Israel is respected. Putin is respected. North Korea is respected. Donald Trump is respected. Why? Because they're all crazy. These people, everyone agrees on is they could, if threatened enough, they'll press a button and blow up the world. Okay? That's what gets you respect in this world. The crazier you are, the more legitimacy you have. Okay? And that's why the games they're playing are crazy. Will this lead to the end of the world? Probably, okay? That's something I've been teaching you guys for a long, long time. The people in charge are crazy, the game they're playing is crazy, it's gonna lead to the end of the world. All right, we're gonna do 3 more questions because we could be here forever, okay? But we'll do 3 more questions and we'll end the examination. Okay, can you read, Alan?
Yeah. Explain that America needs an AI surveillance state operations Stargate to manage domestic rebellion against a coming national draft. You also noted that the current global civil war pits transactional capital against an alliance of nationalists, the church and tech elites, Trump, Theo, Musk. But if the tech elites are using Masonic occult philosophy to build an Antichrist technate that strips human free will, won't Trump's fiercely armed Christian nationalist base eventually realize they are being enslaved by the exact system they are fighting for? Won't the technate trigger a second American Civil War instead of preventing it?
Yeah, this is exactly right. So a civil war is going to happen, and there's many different factions. There's many different reasons why the civil war happens. But one reason is that there's going to be a lot of resistance towards an AI surveillance state. This is exactly right. Okay, and there's really nothing anyone can do right now to stop the civil war from happening. Okay, keep on going.
In this recent lecture on Putin in Beijing, you noted that Vladimir Putin wants Russia to lead the multipolar world, even if it means acting as a junior partner to China. However, given Russia's fierce historical emphasis on absolute sovereignty and its self-imagined as the Third Rome, can Putin's strategy genuinely survive a long-term future where Russia is economically subordinate to the Chinese elite that fundamentally prefer the American world's policemen? What is Russia's exit game if China chooses a divorce?
Okay, this is exactly correct, okay? The Chinese don't trust the Russians because the Russians are extremely nationalistic. There's Russian supremacy, okay? Even though Russia will pretend to be the junior partner to China, the Russians believe they're superior to China. And a lot has to do with the Third Rome eschatology that they have. So if there's a divorce, can Russia survive economically? And the answer is yes. It doesn't need China. Okay, it just needs to fight wars. Because if you think about it historically, how a nation developed wealth was by conquering other nations. Okay? So what Russia is going to do is move towards a total war economy and completely focus on the conquest of its neighbors, especially Ukraine, but also the Baltic states as well, and then Central Asia. Okay, so as long as Russia is able to maintain its internal cohesion and engage in all war, then Russia will be fine. All right, can you keep on reading?
Hello, Ms. Jueting. My question is for the final exam would be plainly simple. According to the lecture material, I'm inclined to believe Putin has a grand plan laid out. What would happen if Putin would cease being Russian leader for reason outside of his control? Would there be individual or collective effort to follow same ideology and continue his plan?
This is a great question, okay? So first of all, I think Putin's going to live a lot longer than people believe. I think he's going to be around for another 20 years. Okay, that's what my instinct tells me. He's going to live for another 20 years, okay? We also know what happens when a great leader dies. It's very interesting what happens, okay? So if you look at Genghis Khan and Muhammad, when they die, okay, there's a pattern that emerges, which is there's at first internal friction. Okay, so the different interests in Russia get together and they start fighting over succession, who succeeds. And then they decide we cannot possibly agree on succession. So what we'll do is we will just go to war with everyone, okay? To just expand outwards. Okay, Russia will just expand outwards. Okay? So you have this massive expansion that might go on for 10, 20 years when it basically conquers everyone around them because no one is as militaristic as they are. But then what happens, and this is really interesting, is just exhaustion. Where they either lose or they win, but everyone's exhausted and then they just decay imperially, okay? So I myself don't see Russia as having a great future, but this is a pattern that emerges if you look at history. You know, when a great leader dies, there's internal friction, internal chaos, which leads to military expansion overseas in order to reduce this internal friction, and then eventually the empire exhausts itself because it's fighting too many wars at once. Okay? And that's the fate I see for Russia. Okay, guys, well, we've been all here for almost 2 hours. We can go on for another 2 hours, but I don't want to because I'm exhausted. Yeah, Vincent?
I think I have a final question. Like, I also wonder, like, why are we born in, like, by ourselves? Like, why am I Asian? Why am I Chinese? Why am I not a white guy? Or why I'm not a, like, people, I'm not a person in another place of the world? Like, why are we ourselves? Is this connected to monad?
Yes, okay, so why are you here, okay? And so the theory is this. Okay, there are lots of reasons why, but let me give you a basic theory, okay? Theory is that you come to Earth as a soul. And your soul has a purpose. And the purpose is always to enlighten yourself. Enlightenment, basically. All right, so you basically up there decide on a purpose. And your purpose could be like, I want to experience being rich, or I want to experience being in love. Okay, you always have a defining purpose that becomes the core of who you are. And so once you have this purpose, then you are assigned to a place in this world that allows you to achieve your purpose. Okay? So you are who you are for a purpose. And this purpose is good. What is good is for you to try to achieve your purpose. Unfortunately, what happens in our world is that because of school, because of parents, because of society, you're blocked from knowing your purpose, from truly pursuing your purpose. And that's part of the purpose as well, because for you to truly fulfill your purpose, you need to overcome a lot of challenges and obstacles, okay? And once you achieve your purpose, then you understand yourself a lot better, okay? And then you go back and you're like, okay, now I want a new purpose. But maybe you don't achieve this purpose, in which case, well, you do it again, okay? All right? And this is the idea of samsara. in Vedic eschatology. Okay? So that's one explanation. There are other explanations, okay? But the thing to remember is that you came here for a purpose. You may not remember what your purpose is, but you can feel what your purpose is. And so what you should always do is trust your intuition, because that's what's going to lead you to your purpose. You're here in this classroom as part of your purpose. I'm here teaching you as part of my purpose. Okay? And that's the structure of the universe. Does that make sense? Okay, guys. All right. So thank you. Enjoy the rest of your life.